A beloved grandmother is found murdered in her garage.
Her purse was sitting on the first step, and she wasn't breathing.
Her lips and face were very blue.
A mysterious woman is caught fleeing the scene of the crime.
The lady was wearing all black. I just know something's not right.
She just said, I didn't do anything. You kind of get that gut, something happened.
The victim's loved ones suspect a love triangle was involved.
My mother had the worst taste in men.
She just kind of kept that pattern pretty much all of our life.
And the investigation leads to a romantic rival willing to snuff out the competition by any means necessary.
She was obsessed.
She put spells on them to try to split them up.
Can't have a murder in the state of Mississippi without a little voodoo or hoodoo in it.
Leaving a wake of destruction in her path.
I was going to be her perfect scapegoat.
Anybody that goes 9 months planning somebody's murder is not sorry.
I just don't want people to think I'm this monster because I'm not.
February 11th, 2020. For small business owners Trent and Stephanie Rogers, it's another busy Tuesday morning in Baldwin, Mississippi. One of the employees at their grocery store, 63-year-old Pamela Britt, isn't feeling well, so they tell her to take a break.
She thought her blood pressure was messed up, and she was gonna go home and maybe see if she could just take a nap and rest a minute.
But when more than an hour passes without hearing from Pam, they begin to get worried.
Around 12 o'clock, 12:05, Stephanie had told me, Pam didn't make it back, which that's not like Pam. She come up and talked to me and asked if I would call her, and I tried to call her and I couldn't get an answer.
Trent said, what do you think I need to do? I said, I don't feel good about it. I think you should go check on her.
Since Pam lives only a few minutes away, they decide to pay her a visit.
I go to the house and I get out and look around. I knock on the door, and then I didn't get an answer. And then I decided I was gonna check and see if maybe there was a door unlocked. I get to the back of the house to open the door, and there was a lady there that opened the door.
To Trent's surprise, it's a woman he doesn't recognize from their small town.
The lady was wearing all black. She had black pants, black shirt, and she had a black coat with a hood on it, and she was wearing a black headband. She was real pale, and she was sweaty. It looked like she had been doing a lot of work. I just know something's not right.
Since Pamela lives so close to the store, Trent is familiar with the comings and goings around her house and most people in town. This woman, however, appears to be a total stranger.
I asked her where Pam was at, and she said that Pam doesn't live here. At first, I thought I had the wrong house, and I called Stephanie and asked her if that was the house that I was supposed to be at.
He described the house and the location, and I said, yes, that is where she's living now. My mind was just racing. I really didn't know what was going on. I was trying to put it all together. I just knew I just had to get there. When I drove up, I immediately take my phone out and I dial 911. I give him the address.
A few minutes later, the woman in black leaves the house and begins walking up the road. Trent follows her, And as responding officer Nicola Ward approaches, the woman suddenly flees into a nearby field.
I saw Trent, and Trent was pointing to the field, and I saw a suspect down there. So I pulled up, got out of my car, and went down the hill. I was attempting to get her to stop. I notified, I'm Officer Ward with the police department. I need to speak with you. Stop. And she continued to walk. I told her to stop again in a pretty hefty voice, and she started to pick up speed. I had to kind of run a little bit to catch up with her. I was getting closer, and I told her to stop, and she just said, I didn't do anything. You kind of get that gut when somebody automatically tells you you didn't do anything, something happened. So I just took her down.
After restraining the mysterious woman, officers try to question her.
I wasn't for sure if she had any weapons on her or anything. I tried to ask her who she was. She wouldn't say anything. I asked her why she was there. She wouldn't say anything.
One of the officers stays with the woman, while the other returns to Pam's house with Trent and Stephanie.
We did not make entry into the house at that particular point in time. The door was locked.
Trent tells them we need to get in this house. And we eventually end up finding Pam in the garage. She had her keys in her hand. Her purse was sitting on the first step, and she wasn't breathing. She didn't have a pulse. It just looked very natural, like she just had some sort of medical episode and just fell over dead.
But the mystery woman's presence suggests another scenario.
I knew that somebody dressed all in black coming out of someone else's house shouldn't be happening. And then it was like, we got to figure out, why is this happening?
Pamela Britt was born in the nearby city of West Point in 1957. Baldwin is a small town, so she is a familiar face to everyone, including police.
My mother had 4 brothers and 1 sister. She was the middle child.
My mother pretty much stayed in West Point until about 16 years old. She married my father, and she got pregnant with me when she was 17 and then had me a month after she turned 18. I don't think they were married maybe a year.
Although her first marriage failed, Pam didn't give up on love. She continued to search for Mr. Right, floating in and out of relationships for many years.
When I was about 10 years old, she met my brother and sister's father. They stayed together probably about 5 years, maybe. We moved after they separated.
Me and my brother and sister grew up in Nettleton. We had a good childhood. She did what she could to support us.
After her children had grown up and started families of their own, in 2018, Pam moved to Baldwin to be closer to her daughters and make a fresh start. She found work at the Rogers grocery store.
I met Pam through her daughter, Robin. I knew she had a background in working at, grocery stores, convenience stores, retail stores. That's all she had done her whole life. Pam could just relate to anybody. She was just a people person.
Outside of work, Pam spent most of her time with her 7 grandchildren.
Being a grandmother was the best thing to her in the world. She pretty much helped raise my kids with me. She had them all the time. They were always at her house on the weekends if, They loved going over there.
It didn't take long for Pam to take up with a new beau. In 2018, she began dating a handsome 45-year-old man named David Scribner.
My mother told me he was a good guy. She didn't really say much. I can only remember having a few conversations with her about him during this whole time they were dating. She kind of was doing her own thing, had finally got in a house and was doing really good for herself. I was happy about that.
But Pam's newfound contentment has come to a crashing halt now that her body has been discovered in her garage. Detectives take a closer look at the crime scene.
There's no obvious sign of any sort of blunt force trauma. There's no gunshot wounds that are apparent or anything like that. What I did notice was marks on her wrist where it looked like something thin had been tied around her wrist. She had what looked like some electrical burn marks on her chest. And her lips and face were very blue, consistent with being without oxygen for some time. So we had a pretty good idea that asphyxiation was the reason. The woman, all dressed in black, had a large multicolored handbag that she was carrying at the time that she was detained, and started going through what items the lady had in the bag.
What they find is beyond incriminating.
There was a pretty stout plastic that you wrap around a pallet of stuff to keep it from coming apart. It was a roll of that. A taser was also in her bag.
There was a dark navy pillowcase and some plastic wrap and some zip ties.
We figured the pillowcase was put over her head and saran wrapped around her face where she could not breathe no more.
So the first thing we're trying to do is identify who the woman in black is that we've got in the back of a patrol car and try to figure out what the motive is for her to do what she has done to Pam.
Coming up, investigators get a possible lead on their mystery woman.
I asked if she knew of anybody that Pam might have been having any kind of trouble with, and she said David's ex.
Leading to a potential stalker.
He put a security camera up and caught footage of a woman in a coat. It never shows her face.
While evidence is being collected at Pam Britt's home, the first officers on the scene take their suspect to police headquarters.
She didn't want to speak, so she was placed in jail, and she sat in jail.
The woman in black remains a mystery. But back at the crime scene, detectives find a potential lead among Pam's belongings.
Pam's phone was in her purse, and I looked through her call log and saw that she had been on the phone with Shawnie Scribner, who is also a person that I know from growing up in Nettleton, Mississippi. So I called her, and that's when we found out that Pam had been dating her son, David Scribner, from Nettleton. I asked Shawnie if she knew of anybody that Pam might have been having any kind of trouble with or things of that nature, and she said, yeah, David's ex, Yvonne. She felt like Yvonne had been poking around their house on a couple of occasions, and that she thought that maybe that's who that was.
Investigators must determine if Yvonne was jealous and decided to get rid of the competition. To learn more about Pam's relationship with David, police contact her daughter.
Me and my husband were at the eye clinic. When I got home, I had a phone call from the Baldwin Police Department. I called the police, and they said they would be out to our house. And they showed up, and they told me that my mom had passed. I didn't understand. Everything gets a little foggy after that.
When I first heard that my mother was murdered, I was at work. My sister calls me and is in a panic, just screaming that she's dead, she's dead. I think I just sat just at work, just kind of stunned. It was a shock.
I really didn't know who could do something like that.
Robin can't tell police anything about Yvonne, but she isn't surprised to learn her mother's death might be linked to her latest boyfriend.
My mother had the worst taste in men. Absolute worst.
She says Pam rushed into the relationship with David after a string of family tragedies.
My brother had just lost his son in July. He had drowned in a swimming pool. Then we turned around and had my uncle, who was my mother's brother, pass away in November.
I knew my mother was hurting from all of this, so she got on a dating website, and she found this guy, David Scribner.
Robin explains to detectives that things took an alarming turn soon after Pam and David started dating, 1 month before her murder.
My mother had said that she had gotten her car one time and there was a pile of rocks that was placed in weird positioning in her floorboard. And this seemed to be happening at David's home in Nettleton. They put a security camera up and caught footage of a woman in a coat. It never shows her face, but you could see her go into the car and reaching under and getting something out from under the car. She didn't know what was going on with it. She had called my sister, telling her about it.
David's mother suspected that it may be David's upset ex, Yvonne. She says when this happened in January, she didn't think the matter was serious enough to bring to police.
Yvonne worked at a restaurant where the waitresses wear all black, and this particular person in the video was also wearing all black. So they logically thought it was probably Yvonne.
In a town as small as Baldwin, Detective Young remembers Yvonne from his childhood. However, when he pays a visit to the jail where the woman in black is being held and refusing to speak, Detective Young does not recognize her.
So everything leaned towards Yvonne, but we knew the woman we had in custody was not Yvonne.
Now, detectives believe the woman in custody may be the woman in the video. Detectives plan to use fingerprints to ID the woman in black and track down Yvonne to be certain that she wasn't involved.
The detective, he had contacted me and he said, Yvonne, we need to talk. And I said, about what? He said, about this murder. And I said, that has nothing to do with me.
A few hours have passed in the murder investigation of Pamela Britt, and the woman in black is still not talking. To make certain that the woman they have in custody is not Yvonne, Detective Young utilizes his small-town connections to bring her in for an interview.
I got a message on Facebook, and at first I went and go in. He said, Yvonne, if you really thought I was going to arrest you, you'd be in handcuffs right now. And I said, that has nothing to do with me. I was at work. I know for a fact I was at work. I have proof.
When Detective Young asks Yvonne about her relationship with David, she tells them it ended in 2013.
The first 5 years me and David were together, everything was great, wonderful. I was madly in love, what I thought.
According to Yvonne, it was a messy breakup, which led to a custody battle over their children.
My girls had been taken from me in 2018. I was fighting in the court system trying to get them back.
The court ruled to leave the children with David. Then, in 2019, she had to deal with another complication: David's new girlfriend. But it wasn't Pamela Britt. Yvonne says it was a woman named Shawnie Vel Young.
I had got a message on Facebook from someone named Shawnie. I didn't have a clue who she was. And then one of my kids had told me that's Daddy's girlfriend. I think Shawnie's main reason was to fill me out, to make sure that I didn't have feelings for David and that I didn't want David back. And I let her know real quick, I'm done with him.
Detectives consider the possibility that Shawnie might have had an axe to grind with Pam as well. After confirming her alibi, detectives conclude that Yvonne was not involved in Pamela's murder. Before they can talk to David about the relationship, he contacts them.
I got a Facebook message from David Scribner, and he asked that I call him as soon as I could, so I did.
David tells detectives that he's heard they have someone in custody for Pam's murder. Like Yvonne, he believes it might be his ex-girlfriend, Shawnie.
He explained to me that Shawnie had been staying with her cousin, Leanne Mann. She reached out to David, and on that particular morning had left sometime between 3 and 6 a.m. in her car under the pretense of going to work at a restaurant local in Corinth, Mississippi, but at this particular time had not returned. And when Leanne started doing some investigating, she had not been at work at all that day.
According to David, Shawnie had never gotten over their breakup, which occurred just prior to his meeting Pam in 2018. He says this led to an unhealthy obsession.
He said she was continuously talking with Leanne about David and Pam's relationship.
It's now 24 hours into the investigation, and detectives ask Leanne to come in and give a statement. She says she's already heard about Pam's murder, and her friend Beth Reed accompanies her to the station. Shawnie Vel Young grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi. Though she was one of 3 sisters, Shawnie was always the center of attention.
We were never close growing up. She was very spoiled. Me and Shawnie and my other sister, we done pageants, and she didn't play well with others. She always thought she was entitled to something more.
Shawnie was pretty mean back then. My brother and my sister both. Shawnie would beat them and blame them for stuff that she had done cruel.
When Shawnie grew up, she moved to New York and got married. When she returned in 2017, she was a single mother with children by 3 different men. And according to Leanne and Beth, she'd already found her next provider.
She told me that she had met David online, that David had bought her a bus ticket to come and visit. David, for whatever reason, felt obligated maybe to help her.
They say Shawnie fell hopelessly in love. But by 2019, David had moved on.
David had lost interest in Shawnie. He started dating Pamela Britt.
Leanne and Beth say Shawnie wasn't willing to accept defeat.
Shawnie showed up at Leanne's house about on or little bit before Thanksgiving 2019. It was not supposed to be a long-term thing at all. Shawnie had other plans. Shawnie told us that she had come back because David wanted her to. They were in love and they were going to be together.
Her take was he was in love with her and not Pam. Said that he didn't want Pam.
Coming up, Shawnie's obsession turns deadly.
I feel like she was patterning her as a hunter would a buck deer.
And investigators find evidence of a murder plot.
When you look at everything on paper, it's just a wow factor that everything fell like it did.
Leanne Mann, the cousin of suspect Shawnie Vel Young, tells investigators that as soon as Shawnie moved in with her, she began fixating on David and his new girlfriend.
David. There was not a day that would go by that it wasn't all about him.
I had been friends with Leanne for 30 years. I didn't like that Shawnie just come in on Leanne. I was very creeped out by Shawnie's presence. From the very second I first met her, she was obsessed. She never spoke of her children. She never spoke of her husband. She never spoke of anything outside of David and Pam.
Leanne and Beth say that Shawnie wanted to be closer to David, who lived just an hour away in Nettleton. Leanne says Shawnie even recruited her own children in her attempts to win David back.
Her kids, her sons, had got in contact, and if I recall, said Shawnie died because of cancer. Just to see how David would react.
When her ploys to gain David's attention were unsuccessful, Shawnie resorted to extreme measures.
Leanne kind of told her that I'd read tarot cards and did things like that. She had asked me several times if I would do something to break Pam and David up. And it was love spells. It was darker type magic.
She wanted him to think about her 24/7, and that was what she was trying to do. You can't have a murder in the state of Mississippi without a little voodoo or hoodoo in it.
I would not do it. I told her from the jump that I didn't want any part of it. I said, I don't work with that kind of magic. Shawnie wanted David for herself at all cost. She did not see anything outside of David. She was completely consumed with this man.
Leanne says that's when Shawnie decided to change her tactics.
Shawnie would take my car and would not come home. I didn't know where she was going. Shawnie would be off doing things that I didn't know.
Looking back now, I feel like she was stalking Pam. Just being gone all of those hours, and looking back now, I can remember Shawnie holding her phone and showing me Pam's Facebook page. That gave Shawnie everything she needed to find Pam, what she drives, follow her home. Now she knows where she lives.
She said that she had put a tracker made out of a cell phone that she had taped up on Pam's car so she would know where Pam was at all times.
I feel like she was patterning her as a hunter would a buck deer.
Leanne says she was becoming increasingly concerned about Shawnie's behavior. On the morning of February 11th, the day Pam was murdered, she says she'd finally had enough and reached out to David online.
Shawnie had took my car to work that morning, and she'd not got home yet. I figured if she was anywhere, she was out trying to find him.
Later that afternoon, Leanne went to the police station to report her car stolen.
One of the patrol officers found the car at Fish Lake later that evening. When we ran the VIN number, it came back to Leanne Mann. We took all the items out of the vehicle. What we did find of interest was a driver's license that belonged to Leanne Mann and bus tickets with Leanne's name on it. So, I mean, it's pretty apparent that Shawnie had used Leanne's driver's license to purchase tickets back to Indiana in Leanne's name. We kind of felt like at that point we knew exactly who we had and exactly what the motive was. The woman in black is Shawnie Young.
They also find an ominous journal entry in Shawnie's handwriting.
The note said that she was going to make this happen. How today was the day, and that she was going to do away with Pam. She wanted David, intended to have him.
Hours after Pamela Britt was found murdered in her garage, Baldwin police are putting together a solid case against her boyfriend's ex, Shawnie Vel Young.
Before Leanne, before Beth, Baldwin Police Department had a suspect for murder with no motive. When Leanne and Beth left after their statements, Baldwin Police Department had a murder with a suspect and a motive. The motive seemed to be jealousy, seemed to be lust, obsession, crazy love.
But when investigators take a look at Shawnie's social media pages, they're surprised by what they find.
So they probably ended up actually beating end of 2017 or early 2018 and started spending some time together.
At the moment, I thought Shawnie and David dated for months. After knowing the case, it came to 10 to 12 days, maybe at the most, that Shawnie and David ever spent time together.
It's not like, there was any rings put on it. By 2019, she was fixated on David and Pam's relationship all day, every day. David, he was not interested in her.
Detectives obtain a search warrant for Shawnie's electronic devices and find further evidence she plotted out Pam's death.
The search history on her phones was, how to kill somebody in different ways. How long does it take somebody to die, and how do you do away with a body? Can you boil a body away? Just crazy things.
When you look at everything on paper, it's just a wow factor that everything felt like it did.
One of the phones confiscated from Shawnie appears to be the tracking device Leanne mentioned. Investigators assume this was placed under the car in the surveillance footage.
It was plastic wrapped and taped up, which is the one that we believe she put underneath the car when it was parked down at David Scribner's house, and how she tracked her to where she lived at.
Investigators theorize that there was a reason Shawnie tried to disguise her identity.
We feel like the suspect was dressing in black to represent Yvonne on camera. She was wanting Yvonne to go down for this murder charge.
I'd never met her, but obviously she had met me because she knew what I looked like, how I dressed, how I fixed my hair. Shawnie was setting the stage for everything that was going to happen to be all my fault anyway. I was going to be her perfect scapegoat. If she hadn't been caught, I would have been arrested.
When the fingerprint testing comes back, police are able to positively identify the woman in black as Shawnie Vel Young. That evening, Shawnie is charged with the murder of Pamela Britt.
I think with the phone that she put on the car, she tracked Pam to work and then from work to home. And she set up her plan to kill Pam.
I believe that Shawnie had waited outside the house until Pam came home. She took the pillowcase that she had in her bag, and as Pam was walking up the steps to go into the house and started to unlock the door, I think she put that pillowcase over her head, jerked her off the steps, and tased her, zip-tied her up, and wrapped plastic around her head until she suffocated to death. Evil. That one was evil.
But when Shawnie breaks her silence, her story is far from expected.
You do know the guy's trying to put this puzzle together, right?
Oh my God, for the rest of my life, protecting myself.
While Shawnie Vel Young is being held on a $5 million bond, prosecutors begin preparing their case for trial.
In law enforcement, it's not what you know, it's what you can show, what you can prove.
She was caught coming out of the garage area where Pam's body was found. In the bag that she had with her coming out were items that were used to create death in the manner that Pam had died, and that was by asphyxiation. There was a taser that matched the marks on Pam's chest and shoulder where she had been tased. She had zip ties that had been around Pam's wrist. We had the history of the obsession that she had with David, just solidifying the motive about why she wanted Pam out of the picture. So the evidence was mounted up there. We charged her with capital murder, which in the state of Mississippi, if you're found guilty of capital murder, the death penalty is on the table.
In the month following Pamela's murder, Shawnie has refused to make any kind of statement. But in March 2020, due to uncertainties surrounding the COVID pandemic, she breaks her silence.
When we sat down, the Lee County Correction Center was just evil, just sitting in a room across the table. She would cry 1 minute, holler 1 minute, talk 1 minute, go back to crying.
Just get yourself on her.
According to Shawnie, she wasn't the one obsessed with losing David. Pam was, and she wanted to get rid of Shawnie.
I've never hurt anybody in my whole life. Never. Not one person. One time I defend myself, this happened.
Take a deep breath. You want to tell me about it?
She wanted to meet. She caught me and him was screwing around. She was afraid she was losing him in her talk. She attacked me. I just don't want people to think I'm this monster, because I'm not. I'm really not. I struggle with this every day.
She tried to claim self-defense and that sort of thing, but there was absolutely zero evidence on any of the 4 phones that Shawnie had There was zero evidence on the phone that Pam had that they had ever had any kind of conversation at all.
I'm going to talk to the lawyer now because I don't think I'll live for the rest of my life protecting myself.
Over the next few years, while Shawnie remains imprisoned, her defense attorneys try to keep the case from going to court. They claim she is unfit to stand trial. But in 2023, she is ruled competent. Rather than risk a death sentence, Shawnie agrees to plead guilty to second-degree murder.
Anybody that goes 9 months planning somebody's murder is not sorry. She's sorry she got caught. She wasn't sorry for what she done. Second-degree murder felt like a slap in my face.
They gave her 27 years. She took a plea deal that she should not have been given, in my opinion.
I don't think it's fair that Shawnie was able to take my mother away from her kids, her grandkids, her life, and then she still has the opportunity to walk out of that prison.
Pam was a very, very good person, and what happened to her, she does not deserve. And the sentence that this lady got is not enough. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I don't want my mother remembered as the woman that got in between somebody and a guy. She was just loving and just funny.
I want people to know that my mom, she was a good person. She was a good person, and she loved her family. She had the biggest, beautiful smile. My family will never be the same after everything. And it hasn't been.
In the quiet, tightly knit communities of the American South, where generations of families live side by side and life moves to a steady, predictable rhythm, the sudden intrusion of malice is not just a shock to the system, it is a tear in the very fabric of local reality. Such was the case in the small, peaceful town of Baldwin, Mississippi, a place where neighbors recognize one another as vehicles. Local business owners greet their patrons by name, and front porches are treated as sanctuaries for quiet afternoons and warm conversations. Yet, beneath the serene surface of this small-town life, a dark, psychological storm was brewing, culminating on a cool Tuesday morning in the year 2020. This tragic case, which claimed the life of a beloved grandmother and dedicated community member, serves as a profound study in the destructive nature of unchecked romantic obsession, the vulnerability of peaceful communities to external hostility, and the ultimate triumph of systematic, collaborative law enforcement. By examining this case, we can glean critical insights into human behavior, analyze the vital role of local familiarity in solving crimes, and discover profound life lessons that may prevent future tragedies of a similar nature. To understand how such an extraordinary tragedy could occur in a place as peaceful as Baldwin, one must first look at the psychological landscape of the perpetrator and the quiet, respectable life of the victim. Pamela Jean Britt, who was 63 years old at the time of her passing, was a woman whose life was defined by dedication to her family and a warm, approachable demeanor. Born in the year 1957 in the nearby city of West Point, Mississippi, Pamela was a middle child who had navigated the challenges of life with resilience. Though her early marriages did not last, she poured her energy into raising her children in the town of Nettleton, working hard in retail and grocery stores to provide them with a stable, loving childhood. As her children grew and began families of their own, Pamela transitioned into her most cherished role, that of a grandmother to 7 grandchildren. In the year 2018, seeking a fresh start and the comfort of being closer to her family, she moved to Baldwin and took a job as a cashier at a local grocery store owned by Trent and Stephanie Rogers. Pamela was a natural people person, the kind of employee who transformed routine transactions into moments of genuine connection. Her warm smile and reliable presence made her a beloved fixture at the store, where she worked alongside people who regarded her not just as an employee, but as a dear friend. Outside of her professional life, Pamela's world revolved around her grandchildren, whom she helped raise with unwavering devotion. Her home was a sanctuary of comfort, a place where her grandchildren spent their weekends, surrounded by warmth and affection. In the year 2018, Pamela also decided to open her heart to new companionship, beginning a relationship with a 45-year-old man named David Scribner. To those who knew them, the relationship seemed to offer Pamela a well-deserved chapter of happiness after a period marked by deep family losses, including the tragic passing of her young grandson and her beloved brother. Unfortunately, unknown to Pamela, this new relationship would draw her into the orbit of a deeply disturbed individual whose grasp on reality had been entirely eroded by a consuming, toxic delusion. The root cause of the tragedy lay in the mind of Shawnie Vel, a woman who had once been in a brief relationship with David Scribner. Psychological studies of criminal behavior often point to a phenomenon known as obsessive relational intrusion, a state wherein an individual becomes so fixated on a former partner that they lose all regard for boundaries, reality, and the law. In the case of Shawnie, this obsession was particularly extreme. Although her romantic involvement with David had lasted for only a very brief period, perhaps 10 to 12 days at most, her mind had constructed an elaborate, permanent fantasy of a life together. When David ended the brief connection and eventually moved on to build a relationship with Pamela, Shawnie did not see a natural end to a casual acquaintance. Instead, she perceived Pamela as a hostile competitor, an obstacle standing in the way of a destiny that she believed was rightfully hers. Over the course of several months, Shawnie's thoughts became entirely consumed by David and Pamela. Her obsession was so complete that she spoke of nothing else, completely neglecting her own children and her personal responsibilities, channeling all of her energy into a campaign of surveillance, sabotage, and ultimately, violence. In analyzing why such cases of extreme obsession occur with alarming frequency in society, psychologists and criminologists often point to the magnifying effect of modern technology and social media. In an era where personal lives are routinely shared online, individuals with obsessive tendencies can easily gather detailed intelligence on their targets without ever making direct contact. Shawnie utilized social media to study Pamela's habits, her vehicle, and her daily routines. By scrolling through public profiles, she was able to construct a detailed map of Pamela's life, turning a benign platform for family updates into a tool for predatory tracking. This digital stalking represents a modern hazard that frequently precedes physical violence, highlighting the critical importance of digital privacy and the need for early recognition of obsessive behaviors. The tragedy unfolded on Tuesday, February 11, 2020, a day that began like any other at the Rogers family grocery store. Pamela had arrived for her shift, but was not feeling well, suspecting that her blood pressure was elevated. Exhibiting the kindness that defined their business, Trent and Stephanie Rogers advised Pamela to go home, rest, and perhaps take a nap to recover. Pamela left the store, intending to return once she felt better. However, when more than an hour passed without any word from her, a sense of unease began to settle over her employers. In a small town like Baldwin, a departure from a normal routine is immediately noticeable. Pamela was exceptionally reliable, and her failure to communicate was entirely out of character. Recognizing that something was amiss, Stephanie asked Trent to check on her, a request born out of genuine care and the protective instinct that binds tight-knit communities together. Trent drove the short distance to Pamela's home on East Clayton Street, expecting perhaps to find her resting or unable to answer her phone. When he arrived, he knocked on the door but received no response. Trusting his instincts, he walked to the back of the property to check for an unlocked door, intending to ensure Pamela was safe. To his profound surprise, the back door was opened by a woman he did not recognize. In a town where faces are familiar, the presence of a total stranger in a friend's home is an immediate red flag. The woman was dressed entirely in black, wearing black pants, a black shirt, a black hooded coat, and a black headband. Despite the cool weather, she was pale, heavily perspiring, and appeared as though she had been engaged in strenuous physical labor. Her appearance was disheveled, and her demeanor was instantly suspicious. When Trent asked for Pamela, the woman coldly replied that Pamela did not live there. This moment of confrontation illustrates the critical importance of human intuition in solving crimes. Trent Rogers did not simply accept the stranger's bizarre assertion and walk away. Though momentarily confused, he immediately contacted his wife to confirm he was at the correct address. And then he made the vital decision to call emergency services, dialing 911. His quick thinking and unwillingness to overlook an anomaly were the first essential steps in bringing a criminal to justice. As Trent stood outside, the mysterious woman in black exited the house and began walking quickly up the road. Sensing that something terrible had occurred, Trent followed her at a safe distance, keeping her in sight while guiding the responding authorities to her location. The first officer to arrive at the scene was Officer Nicola Ward. As the patrol vehicle approached, the suspect noticed the police presence and immediately fled into a nearby field, attempting to evade contact. Officer Ward pursued her on foot, calling out for her to stop. Rather than complying, the woman accelerated her pace, forcing the officer to sprint to catch up with her. When Officer Ward finally apprehended and restrained the suspect, the woman immediately blurted out, "Mott didn't do anything." In the realm of criminal interrogation, such spontaneous, unprovoked denials of guilt are highly significant. They reveal a consciousness of guilt as an innocent person's natural response to being stopped by police is typically confusion or a demand for explanation, rather than an immediate defense against unspecified accusations. The suspect's refusal to provide her name or explain her presence further solidified the officer's suspicions that a serious crime had occurred. While one officer remained with the detained suspect, Officer Ward returned to Pamela's residence with Trent and Stephanie Rogers. The house was locked, but the urgency of the situation demanded entry. Upon searching the property, they made the devastating discovery in the garage. Pamela was found lying on the ground, her keys still clutched in her hand and her purse resting on the first step. She was not breathing, and she had no pulse. To an untrained eye, the scene might have initially suggested a sudden, tragic medical episode, such as a heart attack brought on by her high blood pressure. There were no obvious signs of blunt force trauma, no gunshot wounds, and no immediate evidence of a violent struggle. However, the presence of the suspicious stranger fleeing the scene demanded a meticulous forensic examination. Upon closer inspection, investigators noted subtle but highly incriminating physical evidence. There were faint marks around Pamela's wrists, consistent with being bound by a thin material, and small electrical burn marks on her chest and shoulder. Most significantly, Pamela's lips and face exhibited a deep blue coloration, a classic clinical sign of cyanosis resulting from severe oxygen deprivation. The medical examiner would later confirm that the cause of death was asphyxiation. The absence of massive trauma did not indicate a peaceful passing. Rather, it pointed to a calculated, quiet method of execution designed to minimize noise and leave as little physical evidence as possible. The search of the suspect's large multicolored handbag yielded a collection of items that could only be described as a portable toolkit for kidnapping and murder. Inside the bag, officers discovered a roll of heavy-duty plastic wrap, a handheld taser, a dark navy pillowcase, and a collection of plastic zip ties. The forensic theory of the crime immediately fell into place. Investigators surmised that the perpetrator had lain in wait for Pamela to return home. As Pamela opened her garage and prepared to enter her house, the assailant ambushed her from behind, using the taser to incapacitate her, binding her wrists with zip ties, and then placing the pillowcase over her head, securing it with plastic wrap to cut off her supply of oxygen. The sheer cruelty and deliberation of this method revealed a chilling level of planning, far removed from a crime of sudden passion. As the investigation shifted to police headquarters, the primary challenge facing detectives was identifying the silent suspect and establishing a motive for the senseless killing. In a small community, detectives often rely on local connections and personal knowledge to piece together relationships. Detective Young, looking through the call logs on Pamela's phone, discovered that one of her recent conversations had been with Jhene Scribner, a local resident whom he had known since childhood. Upon contacting Jhene, the detective learned of Pamela's relationship with David Scribner and immediately asked if Pamela had been experiencing conflict with anyone. Jhene pointed directly to David's ex-partner, a woman named Yvonne. This lead introduced the first major complication in the case. Yvonne worked at a local restaurant where the employees routinely wore all black attire, matching the clothing worn by the suspect caught at the scene. Furthermore, David's family recalled an incident from the previous month in January when a security camera had captured footage of a woman in a dark coat tampering with Pamela's vehicle, placing rocks in the floorboard, and retrieving an object from beneath the car. Because of the all-black clothing, the family had logically assumed the culprit was Yvonne, driven by lingering resentment over her past relationship with David and a bitter custody dispute over their children. However, when Detective Young visited the jail to view the detained suspect, he realized that the woman in custody was not Yvonne. Despite his personal familiarity with Yvonne from their youth, the pale, silent woman in the cell was a stranger to him. This discrepancy forced investigators to look deeper, demonstrating the danger of tunnel vision in criminal investigations. Rather than assuming the suspect was simply an associate of Yvonne, the police systematically verified Yvonne's alibi. Detective Young contacted Yvonne, who cooperated fully, proving she had been at work during the time of the murder. This vital step cleared an innocent woman and redirected the focus of the investigation toward a far more elusive and dangerous adversary. The breakthrough in the case came when David Scribner contacted the police, expressing concern that the woman in custody might be another former acquaintance of his, Shawnie Vel Young. David revealed that Shawnie had been staying with her cousin, Leanne Mann, in the nearby town of Corinth, Mississippi. According to David, Shawnie had left the residence early that morning under the false pretense of going to work, but had not returned. When Leanne began investigating her cousin's whereabouts, she discovered that Shawnie had never arrived at her job. The subsequent interview with Leanne Mann and her friend Beth Reed painted a vivid portrait of Shawnie's psychological descent. Shawnie, who had grown up in Tupelo, Mississippi, was described by her own family as a highly entitled, spoiled individual who had participated in beauty pageants as a child and struggled to cooperate with others. After a failed marriage in New York, she returned to Mississippi as a single mother. When she met David online, she quickly developed an intense, consuming obsession with him. Even though their actual dating relationship was incredibly brief, Shawnie was entirely unwilling to accept its conclusion. She convinced herself that David was deeply in love with her, and that Pamela was the sole obstacle to their reunion. Leanne and Beth recounted how Shawnie's obsession had taken over her daily life. She spoke of nothing but David and Pamela, ignoring her own children and household responsibilities. In her desperation, Shawnie had even tried to enlist her children in bizarre schemes, such as sending messages to David, falsely claiming that she had passed away from cancer, simply to gauge his emotional reaction. When these manipulations failed to elicit the desired response, Shawnie turned to more desperate measures. She begged Beth to perform love spells and dark magic to tear David and Pamela apart, believing that mystical intervention could force David's affection back to her. This bizarre detail highlights the length to which an obsessive mind will go to avoid accepting reality, grasping at any perceived solution, no matter how irrational, to maintain the illusion of control. When spiritual manipulation failed, Shawnie turned to physical surveillance. She began taking her cousin's vehicle without permission, disappearing for hours at a time. Investigators realized that during these unexplained absences, Shawnie was actively stalking Pamela. She monitored Pamela's social media to learn her vehicle description, her work schedule, and her home address. In a particularly chilling revelation, Leanne recalled Shawnie boasting about constructing a tracking device out of a mobile phone and taping it to the undercarriage of Pamela's car. This explained the security footage from January, where a figure in black was seen reaching beneath Pamela's vehicle. Shawnie had been tracking her victim's movements with mathematical precision, studying her daily patterns, much like a hunter tracks prey. The forensic evidence gathered from Leanne's vehicle, which was found abandoned near a local lake, provided the final, undeniable links in the chain of guilt. Inside the car, investigators found Leanne's driver's license and bus tickets purchased in Leanne's name for a trip to Indiana. Shawnie had stolen her cousin's identity, intending to use the physical resemblance between them to flee the state after committing the crime. A search of Shawnie's electronic devices revealed a terrifying digital trail. Her search history included inquiries on various methods of taking a human life, calculations on how long it takes for a person to perish from lack of oxygen, and highly disturbing queries on how to dispose of a physical body. Additionally, police found a handwritten journal entry in which Shawnie explicitly stated her intention to eliminate Pamela on that very day. declaring that she wanted David and intended to have him at any cost. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of Shawnie's plot was her attempt to frame Yvonne for the crime. By dressing in the specific all-black attire associated with Yvonne's workplace, Shawnie hoped that any surveillance footage or witness descriptions would point directly to David's ex-wife. She had meticulously set the stage to cast an innocent woman as the perfect scapegoat, intending to satisfy her own obsession while ensuring that her rivalous former partner suffered the consequences. This layer of deception demonstrates a high level of criminal sophistication, revealing a mind that was not merely acting on a sudden impulse, but rather executing a calculated, multi-layered conspiracy over the course of 9 months. When confronted with the overwhelming mountain of physical, digital, and testimonial evidence, Shawnie's facade began to crumble. Though she initially attempted to claim self-defense, asserting that Pamela had ambushed her in the street, the digital evidence completely refuted her story. There was absolutely no record of communication between the two women, and the tracking device, search histories, and prepared murder kit proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Shawnie was the sole aggressor. Faced with the prospect of a capital murder charge and the possibility of the death penalty, Shawnie ultimately agreed to a plea deal in the year 2023, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and receiving a sentence of 27 years in prison. For Pamela's grieving family, the sentence felt terribly inadequate. A beloved mother and grandmother had been taken away in a senseless act of violence, leaving a void that could never be filled. Yet, amidst the tragedy, the case offers profound lessons for society on how to identify, prevent, and respond to such dangerous behaviors. First, the case highlights the critical importance of taking stalking and obsessive behavior seriously from the very beginning. Often, early warning signs, such as the tampering with Pamela's vehicle in January, are dismissed as minor nuisances or eccentric behavior rather than recognized as precursors to potential violence. Security cameras, digital footprints, and unusual occurrences around one's home should be reported to law enforcement immediately. Had the tracking device and the security footage been thoroughly investigated when they were first discovered, the perpetrator might have been apprehended long before she could execute her deadly plan. Second, this case underscores the value of community vigilance and human intuition. The rapid resolution of this crime was entirely due to the quick actions of Trent and Stephanie Rogers, who refused to ignore a minor disruption in their employees' routine. In an increasingly disconnected world, maintaining strong social connections and looking out for one's neighbors remains one of the most effective deterrents to crime. Trent's decision to investigate Pamela's absence, his immediate call to emergency services upon encountering a stranger, and his assistance in guiding the police to the fleeing suspect were instrumental in preventing the perpetrator from escaping and destroying vital evidence. For law enforcement, the case provides a textbook example of how systematic, collaborative investigation can overcome complex criminal deception. By refusing to accept the suspect's initial attempts at identity theft and framing, the Baldwin Police Department and assisting agencies demonstrated the power of thorough alibi verification and digital forensics. The preservation of the crime scene, the meticulous cataloging of the suspect's bag, and the rapid extraction of digital data from the recovered mobile phones transformed a potentially confusing circumstantial case into an open and shut prosecution. Ultimately, the story of Pamela Britt is not merely a tragedy, but a testament to the enduring strength of family, the vital importance of community care, and the relentless pursuit of justice. While the criminals' elaborate schemes of witchcraft, digital tracking, and identity theft fell apart under the light of systematic investigation, the memory of Pamela lives on through her children and grandchildren. She is remembered not as a victim of a senseless rivalry, but as a warm, smiling woman who brought joy to everyone she met, a dedicated grandmother who loved her family fiercely, and a bright light in the community of Baldwin. Through education, awareness, and a commitment to protecting one another, society can honor her memory by ensuring that the warnings of obsession are never ignored, and that the simple, powerful act of watching out for our neighbors remains our strongest shield against the dark. The peaceful existence of a small town is often built upon a foundation of mutual trust, familiarity, and a shared sense of safety. In these tight-knit communities, residents know their neighbors, recognize the cars that travel down their streets, and take comfort in the predictable rhythm of daily life. However, when a sudden act of violence disrupts this tranquility, the shock waves felt by the community are profound, leaving citizens to grapple with the realization that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places. The tragic events that unfolded on February 11th in the year 2020 in the quiet town of Baldwin, Mississippi, serve as a stark reminder of how quickly a peaceful life can be shattered by a determination born of obsession and unresolved resentment. This case presents a complex tapestry of human emotion, illustrating how rejection can fester into a dangerous fixation, ultimately leading to a planned act of malice. By examining the intricate details of this investigation, we can gain valuable insights into the psychological motives behind such crimes, the societal factors that contribute to their occurrence, the critical clues that allow law enforcement to achieve justice, and the essential life lessons that can help prevent similar tragedies in the future. At the heart of this case is the loss of Pamela Britt, a 63-year-old grandmother who was widely regarded as a warm, hardworking, and deeply family-oriented individual. Pamela had spent her entire life working in retail and grocery stores, a career path that allowed her natural affinity for people to shine. Her warm demeanor made her a familiar and beloved face to coworkers and customers alike. After facing a series of profound family losses, including the passing of her brother and the tragic drowning of her young grandson, Pamela sought a fresh start in Baldwin to be closer to her daughters and grandchildren. She found employment at a local grocery store owned by Trent and Stephanie Rogers, where she quickly became an invaluable part of the team. For Pamela, her family was her entire world, and her role as a grandmother brought her the greatest joy. In the year 2018, she began dating a 45-year-old man named David Scribner, hoping to find companionship and happiness after a difficult period in her life. Little did she know that this relationship would inadvertently place her in the crosshairs of a highly focused and dangerous individual. The day of the incident began like any other Tuesday morning for the business owners and employees at the Rogers grocery store. However, by late morning, Pamela began feeling unwell, experiencing symptoms that she believed were related to her blood pressure. Concerned for her well-being, her employers advised her to return home, take some medication, and rest. When more than an hour passed without any word from her, which was highly unusual for someone as communicative as Pamela, Trent and Stephanie became increasingly worried. Recognizing that Pamela lived only a few minutes away, Trent decided to drive to her residence to check on her. Upon his arrival, he knocked on the door but received no response. Seeking to ensure her safety, He walked to the back of the house to see if any doors were unlocked. To his surprise, the back door was opened by an unfamiliar woman. The appearance and demeanor of this stranger immediately raised red flags for Trent. She was dressed entirely in black clothing, wearing black pants, a black shirt, a black coat with a hood, and a black headband. She appeared pale and was visibly perspiring, looking as though she had been engaged in strenuous physical exertion. When Trent asked if Pamela was home, the woman replied that Pamela did not live at that residence. Confused and sensing that something was deeply wrong, Trent contacted his wife to verify the address before calling 911 to report the suspicious encounter. As the woman in black began walking away from the property, Trent kept a watchful eye on her. When a local police officer, Nicola Ward, arrived at the scene, the suspect suddenly fled into a nearby field. Officer Ward pursued the woman, calling out for her to stop. Instead of complying, the woman accelerated her pace, prompting the officer to run and physically restrain her. Upon being detained, the woman immediately proclaimed her innocence, saying that she had not done anything, an automatic defense that further heightened the officer's suspicions. While one officer remained with the detained suspect, who refused to identify herself or explain her presence, other officers returned to Pamela's residence with Trent and Stephanie. Unable to gain entry through the locked front doors, they eventually made their way to the garage. It was there that they made a devastating discovery. Pamela was lying on the ground, unresponsive, with her keys still clutched in her hand and her purse resting on the first step. To an untrained eye, the scene might have suggested a natural medical episode, but the presence of the mysterious woman in black pointed to a far more sinister reality. A closer examination of the scene by investigators revealed subtle but highly significant physical clues. There were faint marks on Pamela's wrists, indicating that they had been bound with some type of thin restraint, and small electrical marks were visible on her chest. Her face and lips exhibited a distinct blue coloration, which was highly consistent with asphyxiation due to a prolonged lack of oxygen. The critical breakthrough in the initial stages of the investigation came from a search of the large multicolored handbag that the suspect had been carrying at the time of her arrest. Inside the bag, officers discovered an assortment of items that immediately clarified the nature of the crime. The contents included a roll of pre-stretched plastic wrap, a taser, a dark navy pillowcase, and a collection of plastic zip ties. The combination of these items allowed investigators to reconstruct the sequence of events. It became clear that the suspect had laid in wait for Pamela, using the taser to incapacitate her, binding her wrists with zip ties, and using the pillowcase and plastic wrap to cut off her oxygen supply. The calculation involved in assembling such a specific kit of materials demonstrated a high degree of planning and intent, dispelling any notion that the crime was a spontaneous act. As the suspect sat in the local jail refusing to speak, detectives faced the urgent task of identifying her and establishing a motive for the crime. A search of Pamela's mobile phone revealed a recent call history with jhene Scribner, the mother of Pamela's boyfriend, David. When contacted by investigators, jhene provided a vital lead, expressing her suspicion that David's former romantic partner, a woman named Yvonne, had been acting suspiciously around their property. jhene noted that Yvonne worked at a local establishment where the employees wore all black attire, leading her to believe that Yvonne might be the individual who had previously been captured on a home security camera, behaving suspiciously around David's residence in the month of January. Detectives immediately sought to verify this lead, reaching out to Yvonne to conduct an interview. However, as a small-town detective who kanoebive kept many of the local residents, the lead investigator quickly realized that the woman they held in custody was not Yvonne. When interviewed, Yvonne provided a solid and verifiable alibi, demonstrating that she had been at her place of employment during the time of the crime. She also explained that her relationship with David had ended several years prior, in the year 2013, and that her subsequent interactions had been limited to custody matters regarding their children. Yvonne then introduced a critical new piece of information, revealing that in the year 2019, David had been involved with another woman named Shawnie Vel. Yvonne recalled receiving messages from Shawnie, who seemed intent on determining if Yvonne still harbored any romantic feelings for David. This revelation shifted the focus of the investigation toward Shawnie. Shortly thereafter, David Scribner contacted the police, expressing his concern that his former girlfriend, Shawnie, might be involved in the crime. He explained that Shawnie had developed an intense, unhealthy obsession with him and had refused to accept the end of their brief relationship, which had lasted only a short period of time before he began dating Pamela. David informed investigators that Shawnie had recently been staying with her cousin, Leanne Mann, in a nearby town. When detectives contacted Leanne, they discovered that she and her friend, Beth Reed, were already highly concerned about Shawnie's behavior. Leanne and Beth provided investigators with a detailed look into Shawnie's psychological state in the months leading up to the crime. They described her as a deeply obsessive individual whose thoughts and conversations were entirely consumed by David. Despite the brevity of her past relationship with him, Shawnie had convinced herself that they were destined to be together, and that Pamela was the sole obstacle standing in her way. Her fixation was so intense that she had reportedly attempted to use love spells and other unconventional methods in an effort to dissolve the relationship between David and Pamela. When these attempts failed to produce the desired result, her behavior escalated into physical stalking. According to Leanne, Shawnie would frequently borrow her car for extended periods, leaving without explanation. In hindsight, it became clear that Shawnie was using these opportunities to monitor Pamela's movements, locate her residence, and track her daily routine. Shawnie had even gone so far as to construct a makeshift tracking device using a mobile phone, which she wrapped in plastic and secured underneath Pamela's vehicle. This explained the security camera footage from January, which had captured a figure in dark clothing reaching under Pamela's car. The level of preparation and surveillance employed by the perpetrator resembled that of a hunter tracking its target, demonstrating a chilling level of deliberation. On the morning of February 11th, Shawnie had taken Leanne's car under the false pretense of going to work. When she failed to return, Leanne Gurive kept suspicious and eventually contacted the police to report the vehicle as stolen. The car was later located parked near a body of water known as Fish Lake. Inside the vehicle, investigators found several highly incriminating items, including Leanne's driver's license and bus tickets to Indiana, purchased in Leanne's name. This discovery revealed a dual purpose. Shawnie had intended to use her cousin's identity to flee the area after committing the crime, while also attempting to divert suspicion away from herself. Additionally, a search of the vehicle yielded a personal journal containing entries in Shawnie's handwriting, including an explicit note indicating her intent to eliminate Pamela on that very day in order to secure her future with David. A forensic analysis of Shawnie's electronic devices further solidified the case against her. Investigators discovered a search history filled with queries concerning various methods of taking a human life, the time required for a person to succumb to lack of oxygen, and ways to dispose of physical evidence. This digital trail provided undeniable proof of long-term planning, contradicting any claims of a sudden impulse or self-defense. Furthermore, fingerprints and DNA analysis confirmed that the woman detained in the field was indeed Shawnie Vel Young. The evidence also suggested that Shawnie had deliberately dressed in all-black clothing to mimic the work attire of David's other former partner, Yvonne, hoping that any security footage or eyewitness accounts would implicate Yvonne as the perpetrator. This manipulative tactic highlights the calculated sophistication of the crime, as Shawnie sought to eliminate her rival while ensuring that an innocent person would bear the blame. Following her arrest, Shawnie was charged with capital murder, a charge that carried the possibility of the death penalty under Mississippi law. For several weeks, she maintained her silence, but as the legal proceedings advanced and the global pandemic introduced uncertainties into the court system, she chose to make a statement. In a highly emotional interview, she attempted to portray herself as the victim, claiming that Pamela had been the one obsessed with David and had initiated a physical confrontation, forcing Shawnie to act in self-defense. However, investigators found absolutely no evidence to support this narrative. A thorough review of the mobile phones belonging to both women revealed no communication history between them, completely undermining the claim of a prearranged meeting or ongoing dispute. As the case progressed toward trial, Shawnie's defense team sought to argue that she was mentally incompetent to stand trial, leading to years of evaluations and legal delays. Ultimately, in the year 2023, she was ruled competent to face the charges. Rather than proceed to a trial where she could face the ultimate penalty, Shawnie entered a guilty plea to the charge of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years in prison, a resolution that brought a measure of closure to the legal proceedings, but left Pamela's family feeling that true justice had not been fully served, given the calculated nature of the crime and the permanent loss they must endure. Analyzing the motives behind this tragic case reveals a profound intersection of obsession, rejection, and a complete lack of empathy. Shawnie's actions were driven by an inability to accept the boundaries of an ended relationship. In her mind, her brief connection with David was of monumental significance, and she projected her own desires onto him, refusing to acknowledge his choice to move on with Pamela. This type of pathological jealousy often stems from deep-seated insecurity and a fragile sense of self-worth, where the individual links their entire identity to the validation of a romantic partner. When that validation is denied, the individual's focus shifts from love to control, and anyone perceived as an obstacle becomes a target for resentment. The frequency with which such cases of obsessive stalking and subsequent violence occur in modern society can be attributed to several contributing factors. The proliferation of digital communication and social media platforms has made it easier than ever for an individual to monitor the lives of others from a distance. Social media accounts often provide a wealth of personal information, including location details, daily routines, and social connections, which can be exploited by a determined stalker. This ease of access can fuel an obsessive mindset, allowing an individual to maintain a constant, one-sided connection with their target without their knowledge. Additionally, societal tendencies to overlook or downplay early warning signs of harassment can allow obsessive behaviors to escalate unchecked. Often, victims or their families may perceive unusual occurrences, such as misplaced items or strange noises, as minor nuisances rather than indicators of a serious threat, delaying intervention until it is too late. To combat this issue and prevent future tragedies, it is essential to cultivate a high level of community awareness and proactive intervention. Families and individuals must be educated on the critical importance of taking any form of harassment or stalking seriously. If an individual notices unusual occurrences, such as unexplained items near their property, signs of unauthorized access to their vehicles, or persistent unwanted attention, these incidents should be documented and reported to law enforcement immediately. Establishing clear boundaries and seeking legal protections, such as restraining orders, can create an official record of harassment, making it easier for authorities to intervene before behavior escalates into physical violence. Furthermore, support systems must be readily available for individuals experiencing harassment, ensuring they have the resources and guidance necessary to navigate these frightening situations safely. The successful resolution of this case highlights several key strategies that can enable law enforcement agencies to identify and apprehend perpetrators more rapidly. First and foremost, the rapid response and keen observational skills of the responding officers were instrumental in capturing the suspect before she could flee the area. Trent's quick thinking in notifying authorities and keeping a visual watch on the suspect allowed Officer Ward to intervene immediately. This underlines the value of community police partnerships, where vigilant citizens play an active role in maintaining public safety. Additionally, the meticulous collection and analysis of physical and digital evidence proved to be the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. By thoroughly examining the contents of the suspect's handbag and conducting a forensic audit of her electronic devices, investigators were able to construct an indisputable timeline of preparation and intent. The digital footprint left by the perpetrator, including her search history and the tracking device coordinates, provided concrete evidence that dismantled her claims of self-defense. In the modern era, the integration of digital forensics into standard investigative procedures is vital, as individuals almost invariably leave a trail of electronic data that can reveal their true motives and actions. Furthermore, the collaboration between different jurisdictions and the utilization of community networks allowed detectives to quickly look past false leads and identify the true perpetrator. By interviewing Yvonne and establishing her alibi, investigators prevented a miscarriage of justice and redirected their resources toward the actual suspect. This demonstrates the importance of maintaining an open mind during an investigation and systematically verifying every lead rather than relying on initial assumptions. The dedication of the investigating forces, who worked tirelessly to piece together the fragments of this complex puzzle, stands as a testament to their commitment to honoring justice and protecting the community. The life lessons to be drawn from this tragedy extend far beyond the legal outcome. This case underscores the profound value of human life and the devastating ripple effects that an act of violence can have on an entire family. Pamela Britt's children and grandchildren were robbed of a loving mother and grandmother whose presence brought warmth and joy to their lives. Her memory is honored not by the circumstances of her passing, but by the legacy of love and kindness she left behind. For the community, The story serves as a powerful call to vigilance, empathy, and active mutual support. By fostering an environment where neighbors look out for one another, report suspicious activities, and support those who are vulnerable, society can build a stronger shield against the forces of malice and obsession. In reflecting upon this journey through the dark corridors of obsession and the ultimate triumph of justice, we are reminded of the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the profound grief experienced by Pamela's loved ones, they continue to cherish her memory and advocate for a safer, more compassionate world. The efforts of the Baldwin Police Department and the supporting investigators serve as a shining example of public service, demonstrating that even when faced with calculated deception, the truth will ultimately prevail. By learning from these tragic events and implementing proactive measures in our daily lives, we can contribute to a safer society where the values of peace, respect, and justice are upheld for all. The quiet and close-knit community of Baldwin, Mississippi, is a place where neighbors know one another, where the rhythms of daily life are predictable, and where safety is generally taken for granted. Yet, on a chilly morning of February 11th, 2020, this sense of peace was shattered by a crime born of an alarming and deeply irrational obsession. The tragic loss of Pamela Jean Britt, a beloved 63-year-old grandmother, serves as a sobering reminder of the dark pathways human emotions can take when left unchecked. It also stands as a testament to the swift, dedicated efforts of local law enforcement officers who refuse to let a calculated act of violence go unsolved. By studying the details of this investigation, the psychological mechanisms of the perpetrator, and the critical decisions made by ordinary citizens, we can draw profound lessons about vigilance, community safety, and the triumph of justice. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, we must look at the events of that fateful Tuesday. Pamela Britt was a dedicated employee at the local grocery store in Baldwin, owned by Trent and Stephanie Rogers. Known to everyone as a warm, outgoing person who could relate to anyone, Pamela spent most of her time outside of work caring for her family, especially her 7 grandchildren. On the morning of February 11th, 2020, she was not feeling well, suspecting that her blood pressure might be elevated. Her employers kindly suggested that she take a break to go home, rest, and perhaps take a nap. This was a normal, compassionate interaction in a small town, but as more than an hour passed without any word from Pamela, a sense of unease began to grow. By 12 o'clock or 12:05 in the afternoon, Stephanie Rogers noted that Pamela had not returned, which was entirely unlike her reliable nature. After attempts to reach her by phone went unanswered, Trent Rogers decided to make the short drive to Pamela's home to check on her well-being. Upon arriving at the residence, Trent knocked on the door but received no response. Seeking to ensure Pamela was safe, he went around to the back of the house to see if any doors were unlocked. As he reached the back door, it opened, and he was confronted by a woman he did not recognize. In a small town where familiar faces are the norm, this stranger stood out immediately. She was dressed entirely in black, wearing black pants, a black shirt, a black hooded coat, and a black headband. She appeared pale, sweaty, and looked as though she had been engaging in strenuous physical exertion. When Trent asked where Pamela was, the woman claimed that Pamela did not live there. Confused and sensing that something was terribly wrong, Trent stepped back, called his wife to verify the address, and immediately dialed 911. As Trent remained on the phone with emergency dispatchers, the mysterious woman in black walked away from the house and began traveling up the road. When a responding police officer, Nicola Ward, arrived at the scene, Trent pointed toward the departing figure. Officer Ward followed her and attempted to initiate a conversation, identifying herself and asking the woman to stop. Instead of complying, the woman quickened her pace, eventually fleeing into a nearby field. Officer Ward pursued her and, upon catching up, detained the suspect. Before any formal questions could be asked, the woman spontaneously exclaimed that she had not done anything, a defensive reaction that immediately raised the officer's suspicions. The suspect refused to provide her name or explain her presence, and she was transported to the local police headquarters for further investigation. Meanwhile, back at the residence, the grim reality of the situation was discovered. Trent, Stephanie, and the responding officers found Pamela Jean Britt in her garage. She was lifeless, holding her keys in her hand, with her purse resting on the first step of the staircase. Initially, the scene resembled a tragic but natural medical emergency, as if she had simply collapsed. However, a closer forensic examination of her body revealed a far more sinister truth. There were clear marks on her wrists, indicating that they had been tightly bound with a thin material. There were also distinct electrical burns on her chest and shoulder, and her lips and face were deeply blue, a classic clinical sign of oxygen deprivation. It became evident that Pamela had not suffered a natural medical episode. She had been the victim of a deliberate, violent assault resulting in asphyxiation. A search of the large, multicolored handbag carried by the detained woman in black yielded a collection of highly incriminating items. Within the bag, investigators discovered a roll of plastic wrap, a taser that matched the electrical burn marks on Pamela's body, a dark navy pillowcase, and plastic zip ties. The physical evidence strongly suggested a pre-planned method of restraint and suffocation. The challenge for the investigators was to identify the silent woman in custody and determine the motive behind such a ruthless crime. The breakthrough in the investigation began with Pamela's own mobile phone, which was recovered from her purse. A review of her call logs showed a recent conversation with Jhene Scribner, a resident of the nearby town of Nettleton. When the detective contacted Jhene, he learned that Pamela had been dating Jhene's son, David Scribner. Upon being asked if Pamela had been experiencing conflict with anyone, Jhene pointed to David's former girlfriend, Yvonne. According to Jhene, Yvonne had allegedly been seen loitering around the house on previous occasions, leading the family to suspect she might be stalking them. This lead was pursued with high priority. In a small town, connections are deep, and the lead detective remembered Yvonne from his youth. However, when he visited the jail to look at the woman in custody, he confirmed that she was not Yvonne. To resolve any ambiguity, the detective reached out to Yvonne directly. Yvonne, who cooperated fully, provided a verifiable alibi, proving she was at Mof, her workplace, at the time of the murder. She explained that her relationship with David had ended years prior, in 2013, and that she was focused entirely on her own life and a custody dispute. Furthermore, Yvonne revealed an important clue. In 2019, she had been contacted on social media by another former girlfriend of David's, a woman named Shawnie Vel. Yvonne recalled that Shawnie seemed deeply insecure, seeking reassurance that Yvonne had no intentions of reconciling with David. As the police continued their work, David Scribner contacted them, expressing concern that the perpetrator might be Shawnie Vel. David explained that Shawnie had developed an extreme, unhealthy obsession with him after their brief relationship ended. He revealed that Shawnie had been staying with her cousin, Lee Ann Mann, in Corinth, Mississippi, and had left early that morning under the pretense of going to work at a restaurant. However, she had not arrived at work, and her whereabouts were unknown. The investigators summoned Leanne Mann and her friend Beth Reed to the police station. Their testimonies painted a chilling picture of Shawnie's psychological state. According to Leanne, Shawnie was utterly consumed by her obsession with David. Despite the fact that her relationship with David had lasted for a mere 10 to 12 days, Shawnie acted as though they were destined to be together. She spoke of him constantly, refused to focus on her own children or life, and grew increasingly resentful of Pamela, whom she viewed as her sole rival. Shawnie's desperation led her to seek out love spells and darker practices in a futile attempt to break up David and Pamela. When these efforts failed, her tactics turned physical. Leanne revealed that Shawnie had begun taking her car for hours at a time without explanation. It was later understood that Shawnie was actively stalking Pamela, using information gathered from social media to track her daily routines, locate her home, and identify her vehicle. Most alarmingly, Shawnie had fashioned a tracking device using a mobile phone wrapped in plastic and tape, which she secretly attached to the undercarriage of Pamela's car. This explained a strange incident in January, when Pamela discovered a pile of rocks placed on her floorboard and observed security footage of a hooded figure tampering with her vehicle. On the afternoon of the murder, Leanne had gone to the police to report her vehicle stolen, as Shawnie had not returned with it. The car was eventually located by patrol officers near Fish Lake. A search of the vehicle revealed Leanne's identification card and bus tickets to Indiana, which had been purchased in Leanne's name. This discovery made the motive and the identity of the woman in custody clear. The silent suspect was indeed Shawnie Vel Young. Among her personal effects, police found an ominous journal entry in her own handwriting, explicitly stating her intention to eliminate Pamela on that very day, so she could finally have David to herself. Digital forensics performed on Shawnie's phone revealed search queries on methods of ending a human life, disposing of a body, and evading detection. A particularly disturbing aspect of the crime was Shawnie's attempt to frame Yvonne. By dressing in all black, a style of clothing associated with the restaurant where Yvonne worked, Shawnie hoped that any eyewitnesses or security cameras would point the finger of suspicion directly at Yvonne, making her the perfect scapegoat. This level of calculation demonstrated a high degree of premeditation, spanning several months of planning and execution. Despite the overwhelming weight of the evidence, including the matching taser burns, the zip ties, and the recovery of her physical DNA and fingerprints, Shawnie remained uncooperative for weeks. When she finally broke her silence in March of 2020, she attempted to construct a narrative of self-defense, claiming that Pamela had initiated the physical confrontation. However, the forensic evidence, the lack of any defensive wounds on Shawnie, and the total absence of communication between the two women on their electronic devices completely discredited this claim. After a series of legal evaluations regarding her competency to stand trial, Shawnie Vel Young chose to plead guilty to second-degree murder in 2023, avoiding a potential death sentence and receiving a term of 27 years in prison. Analyzing the motives behind this tragic case reveals the devastating consequences of extreme psychological projection, romantic obsession, and a complete lack of empathy. Shawnie Young's actions were driven by a delusional belief that removing Pamela from the equation would automatically restore her brief, insignificant relationship with David. This type of criminal behavior often occurs when an individual ties their entire self-worth and identity to another person, leading to a profound state of cognitive distortion where any obstacle is viewed as an existential threat that must be destroyed. These cases are, unfortunately, not isolated. They occur with alarming frequency because of the ease with which modern technology can be exploited to monitor and stalk victims. Social media platforms provide a wealth of personal information, allowing individuals with malicious intent to map out a victim's daily habits, workplace, and residence. Furthermore, the accessibility of tracking technology, even through improvised means such as a concealed mobile phone, lowers the barrier for persistent harassment and stalking. For law enforcement, several key details and clues were vital in bringing this perpetrator to justice. The first was the immediate, observant response of Trent Rogers, whose suspicion of an unfamiliar person in a small-town setting prompted an instant call to emergency services. The preservation of the crime scene and the rapid detention of the suspect prevented the destruction of crucial physical evidence, such as the items found in Shawnie's handbag. Additionally, the meticulous verification of alibis and the use of digital forensics on mobile devices allowed the police to quickly dismantle the suspect's attempt to frame an innocent party. The sophistication of the criminal in this case lay in her planning, her use of a tracking device, her acquisition of a disguise to mimic another person, and her pre-purchased escape route. However, like many who plot such deeds, her undoing was her failure to account for the unpredictable nature of human vigilance. She did not anticipate that Pamela's employers would care so deeply for her well-being that they would investigate her absence within an hour, nor did she expect to be confronted directly at the scene of the crime. Profound life lessons can be drawn from this tragedy to help prevent future occurrences. First, it is essential to take all signs of stalking and unusual behavior seriously. The strange incidents Pamela experienced, such as the tampering with her vehicle and the presence of suspicious figures on security footage, were early warning signs of an escalating threat. Encouraging individuals to report such occurrences to law enforcement immediately, and fostering a community culture where neighbors look out for one another can interrupt the cycle of planning before it turns violent. Additionally, personal digital privacy should be guarded carefully, limiting the amount of routine, daily information shared publicly online. For law enforcement agencies, the speed of catching such perpetrators can be greatly enhanced through several strategies. Emphasizing rapid community outreach and maintaining strong local networks allows officers to gather reliable intelligence quickly. The integration of modern digital forensic tools, enabling the rapid extraction and analysis of phone records, location data, and social media communications, is indispensable in modern investigations. Finally, continuous training in identifying the psychological markers of obsessive behavior and stalking can help officers recognize the gravity of harassment complaints before they escalate into physical violence. In honoring the memory of Pamela Jean Britt, her family and friends remember her not as a victim of a senseless dispute, but as a loving, vibrant woman who brought joy and laughter to those around her. Her legacy is one of devotion to her family, a warm smile, and a generous heart. Through the pursuit of justice, the truth was laid bare, the guilty party was held accountable, and a community was reminded of the enduring value of vigilance, compassion, and the rule of law. The human experience, while capable of producing profound acts of kindness, empathy, and love, can also give rise to devastating tragedies when possessiveness, rejection, and obsession take root in an unstable mind. In the study of criminology, romantic rivalry has long been documented as one of the most powerful drivers of extreme behavior. Yet society is repeatedly startled when these dark impulses manifest in peaceful, everyday communities. These cases do not occur in a vacuum. Rather, they are the culmination of a slow, progressive psychological unraveling that often goes unnoticed by those surrounding the perpetrator. The frequency with which these stalker cases occur in modern times can be attributed to several critical societal factors, most notably the digital age, which has provided obsessive individuals with unprecedented access to their targets. Through social media platforms and affordable tracking technology, a stalker can monitor a victim's daily routine, location, and personal associations without ever making direct physical contact, significantly lowering the barrier to entry for predatory behavior. Furthermore, the psychological inability to accept rejection often triggers a deep narcissistic injury wherein the rejected individual views the new romantic interest not as a human being with a right to exist, but as an obstacle that must be permanently removed. This dangerous dehumanization allows the perpetrator to rationalize extreme actions, planning and executing a crime under the delusion that eliminating the competition will automatically restore the desired relationship. In small towns, where life generally moves at a predictable pace and neighbors look out for one another, the shock of such violence is magnified. Yet, it is precisely in these close-knit settings where stalkers often feel they can operate under the radar, exploiting the trusting nature of local residents. The motive in these tragedies is rarely about the victim themselves. Instead, the victim becomes a symbolic scapegoat for the perpetrator's internal failures. The obsessive mind projects all its anger, insecurity, and desperation onto the new partner, believing that if this single person were out of the picture, their ideal life would effortlessly fall into place. This level of delusion is frequently fueled by a toxic mixture of jealousy, low self-esteem, and a profound lack of empathy. When a relationship ends, most individuals experience grief and eventually move forward, but the predatory stalker refuses to undergo this natural healing process. They choose instead to dwell in a state of suspended animation, nurturing a dangerous fixation that slowly consumes their thoughts until planning a crime becomes their sole focus in life. When investigating these complex crimes, law enforcement must rely on a combination of traditional detective work and cutting-edge digital forensics. In many instances, the physical evidence left at a scene is only one piece of the puzzle, and it is the digital footprint that ultimately seals the perpetrator's fate. Modern criminals often believe they are highly sophisticated, utilizing burner phones, stealthy tracking devices, and disguised identities to distance themselves from the deed. In their arrogance, they create elaborate plans to misdirect the authorities, sometimes even attempting to frame an innocent party who has a known history with the victim or the mutual partner. This deliberate creation of a scapegoat is a common tactic among calculating perpetrators who hope that the police will follow the most obvious path of least resistance. However, this apparent sophistication is almost always their downfall, as the complexity of their schemes leaves behind a massive trail of digital and physical clues. From search engine queries regarding methods of dispatching a body to the purchase history of tracking equipment and travel tickets, the evidence mounts quickly when scrutinized by experienced investigators. Furthermore, the physical reality of executing such a plan rarely matches the clinical perfection of the perpetrator's imagination, leading to panic, hasty decisions, and immediate detection when confronted by alert citizens or responsive patrol officers. The speed with which a case is resolved often hinges on the initial actions of first responders and the vigilance of the community. In a quiet neighborhood, a stranger behaving oddly or dressed inappropriately for the weather is a vital clue that should never be ignored. When citizens maintain a high level of situational awareness and report unusual activities immediately, they provide law enforcement with the critical head start needed to intercept a criminal before they can escape the area. For the police, catching a perpetrator rapidly requires a seamless integration of localized community knowledge and modern tracking tools. Officers must be trained to recognize the subtle signs of deception during initial encounters, such as an individual claiming they have done nothing wrong before any accusation has even been made. By establishing strong communication channels with the public and maintaining updated databases of digital evidence, investigative units can quickly connect the dots between a suspicious person in a field and a tragedy occurring nearby. The transition from a localized search to a full homicide investigation must be swift, ensuring that critical evidence is preserved and the suspect is detained before they can implement an escape plan. To prevent these devastating events from occurring, both individuals and communities must learn to recognize the early warning signs of obsessive behavior and take proactive measures to protect potential targets. One of the most critical life lessons is to never underestimate the seriousness of stalking or harassment. Even if the actions seem minor at first, a pile of rocks placed in an unusual arrangement, a suspicious figure captured on a security camera, or a sudden influx of strange messages on social media are not mere nuisances. They are clear indicators of a boundary crossing that requires immediate attention. Victims and their loved ones must feel empowered to report these incidents to law enforcement and seek protective measures without delay. Additionally, individuals should practice strict digital hygiene, limiting the amount of personal information, daily routines, and location data they share publicly on social media platforms, as this information is easily weaponized by a dedicated stalker. Communities can establish neighborhood watch programs that encourage residents to look out for one another, ensuring that unusual vehicles or individuals are noted and reported. By fostering an environment of mutual support and open communication, we can create a protective shield around vulnerable individuals and deter those who seek to do them harm. Let us look deeply into the tragic events that unfolded on a quiet Tuesday in the winter of 2020. A case that serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly obsession can shatter lives. In the small town of Baldwin, Mississippi, the morning of February 11, 2020, began like any other for Trent and Stephanie Rogers, the dedicated owners of a local grocery store Mott. Among their valued employees was 63-year-old Pamela Britt, a warm, kind-hearted woman who had spent her entire life working in retail and convenience stores. Pamela was a beloved figure in the community, known for her beautiful smile, her ability to relate to anyone she met, and her deep devotion to her family, which included her children and 7 cherished grandchildren. On this particular Tuesday morning, Pamela was not feeling well, suspecting that her blood pressure was acting up. Recognizing her discomfort, the compassionate store owners suggested that she take a short break, go home to rest, and perhaps take a nap. Pamela agreed, hoping a brief period of quiet would restore her strength. She departed the grocery store and made the short journey to her residence, which was located only a few minutes away. As the minutes stretched into an hour, Trent and Stephanie Rogers began to grow increasingly uneasy. Mort. It was entirely uncharacteristic of Pamela to overstay her break or fail to communicate with her employers. By shortly after 12 o'clock in the afternoon, Stephanie expressed her deep worry to Trent, noting that Pamela had not returned and was not answering her telephone. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, Stephanie asked Trent if he would go to Pamela's house to check on her well-being. Trent, sharing her apprehension, immediately drove to the residence Mott. Upon arriving, he knocked firmly on the front door but received no response. Determined to ensure Pamela was safe, Trent walked to the back of the house to check if any door was unlocked. As he reached the rear entrance, the door suddenly opened, and Trent was confronted by a complete stranger. Standing before him was a pale, sweaty woman dressed entirely in black clothing, including black pants, a black shirt, a black coat with a hood, and a black headband. Despite her exhausted appearance, she seemed to have been engaged in intense physical labor. When Trent inquired about Pamela's whereabouts, the mysterious woman coldly claimed that Pamela did not live at that address, briefly causing Trent to wonder if he had somehow gone to the wrong house. Unsettled and suspicious, Trent stepped away to contact Stephanie to verify the address, which she quickly confirmed was correct. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Trent immediately dialed the emergency response number 911, reporting the suspicious encounter and providing the address to the dispatchers. Sensing that her presence had been compromised, the woman in black stepped out of the house and began walking quickly up the road. Trent followed her from a safe distance, keeping her in his sight as police vehicles began to arrive in the area. Responding officer Nicola Ward spotted Trent, who was urgently pointing toward a nearby field where the suspect had suddenly fled. Mott. Officer Ward exited her patrol car and pursued the woman down a hill, calling out her name and authority as a police officer and commanding her to stop. The woman ignored the orders, accelerating her pace until Officer Ward was forced to run to catch up with her. When the officer closed the distance, the woman blurted out that she had not done anything, an automatic denial that immediately raised the officer's suspicions. After a brief physical struggle, Officer Ward successfully restrained and detained the mysterious suspect, who then refused to speak, reveal her identity, or explain her presence at the property. While one officer remained with the silent suspect, another returned to the residence to join Trent and Stephanie Rogers. Because the house was locked, they searched the exterior and eventually opened the garage. There, they made a heart-wrenching discovery. Pamela Britt lay on the floor, unresponsive and without a pulse. Mart. Her keys were still clutched tightly in her hand, and her purse sat untouched on the first step of the entryway. To an untrained eye, it might have appeared as though Pamela had suffered a sudden, natural medical episode and collapsed. However, the presence of the mysterious woman in black, combined with several chilling physical clues, quickly dispelled any notion of a natural death. Upon closer examination, investigators noticed distinct, thin marks around Pamela's wrists, indicating she had been bound, as well as electrical burn marks on her chest. Her lips and face were deeply blue, a clear sign of severe oxygen deprivation. The evidence suggested she had been subjected to a calculated, forced asphyxiation. In the large, multicolored handbag carried by the detained suspect, officers discovered a treasure trove of incriminating items, including a roll of plastic wrapping material, a taser, a dark navy pillowcase, plastic wrap, and heavy-duty zip ties. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, pointing to a meticulously planned assault designed to silence Pamela forever. At the police headquarters, the suspect remained obstinately silent, refusing to provide even her name. Seeking to identify her and uncover a motive for the brutal crime, detectives turned to Pamela's personal belongings, starting with her mobile phone. In her call history, they found recent communications with the mother of Pamela's boyfriend, David Scribner, a 45-year-old man whom Pamela had been dating since 2018. When contacted, David's mother revealed that Pamela had been experiencing unsettling incidents and suspected that David's former partner, Yvonne, had been stalking them. She noted that Yvonne worked at a local restaurant where the waitresses were required to wear all black clothing, matching the description of the suspect in custody. Armed with this lead, Detective Young sought to verify Yvonne's involvement. However, when he visited the jail, he quickly realized that the woman in custody was not Yvonne, whom he knew from his childhood. Yvonne was contacted and easily proved her innocence, providing a solid alibi that she was at work during the time of the murder. She then introduced a critical new name into the investigation, revealing that David's most recent girlfriend before Pamela was a highly possessive woman named Shawnie Vel Mott. As the investigation deepened, David Scribner contacted the police, expressing his own suspicions that Shawnie Vel was the true culprit. He explained that Shawnie had been staying with her cousin, Leanne Mann, and had left early that morning under the pretense of going to work, but had not returned. Detectives brought in Leanne Mann and her friend Beth Reed for questioning, uncovering a chilling narrative of extreme obsession and psychological instability. Shawnie Vel had grown up in Tupelo, Mississippi, where she was known as a spoiled and difficult individual who struggled to get along with others. After returning to Mississippi from New York in 2017 as a single mother, she met David Scribner online and fell deeply, obsessively in love with him. Although their actual romantic relationship lasted only a brief period of 10 to 12 days, Shawnie's mind transformed this fleeting connection into a life-defining romance. When David moved on and began dating Pamela Britt, Shawnie refused to accept the reality of the situation, becoming completely consumed by jealousy and a desire to reclaim him at any cost. Leanne and Beth revealed that Shawnie's behavior had grown increasingly erratic and dangerous in the months leading up to the murder. She continuously spoke of David and Pamela, ignoring her own children and fixating entirely on the couple. In a desperate bid for David's attention, Shawnie even had her sons contact him with a fraudulent claim that she was dying of cancer. When these emotional ploys failed, she turned to darker methods, repeatedly begging Beth Reed to cast love spells and perform rituals to break up David and Pamela. Refusing to participate in such malice, Beth distanced herself, but Shawnie's obsession only intensified. She began stalking Pamela, utilizing her mobile phone to access Pamela's social media accounts to track her daily routines, vehicle type, and address. In an act of disturbing sophistication, Shawnie constructed a makeshift tracking device using a cellular phone wrapped in plastic and tape, which she covertly attached to the undercarriage of Pamela's car. This allowed her to monitor Pamela's movements in real time, mapping out her patterns like a hunter tracking game. On the morning of February 11, 2020, Shawnie stole her cousin's car, drove to Baldwin, parked a mile away, and waited for Pamela to return home for her lunch break. High. Crucially, Shawnie dressed entirely in black to deliberately mimic the work uniform of David's other ex-girlfriend, Yvonne. hoping that any security cameras or witnesses would point the finger of guilt at an innocent woman, creating the perfect scapegoat for her heinous crime. The mountain of physical and digital evidence against Shawnie Vel Young was overwhelming. Upon searching the stolen vehicle, which police located near a local lake, investigators found a driver S license belonging to Leanne Mann and bus tickets to Indiana, purchased under her cousin S.'s name, indicating that Shawnie had planned to flee the state immediately after the murder Mott High. Inside the car, they also discovered a handwritten journal containing a chilling entry, declaring that today was the day she would finally do away with Pamela. Forensic extraction of Shawnie's electronic devices revealed a horrific search history detailing various methods of murder, how long it takes for a person to suffocate, and how to dispose of a human body. When confronted with this undeniable proof, Shawnie's attempt to portray herself as a victim who acted in self-defense quickly fell apart. As digital forensics proved, there had been absolutely no prior contact or communication between her and Pamela. Despite her defense attorneys attempting to claim she was mentally unfit for trial, Shawnie was ruled competent in 2023. To avoid the possibility of a death sentence, she entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 27 years in prison. Though the victim's family felt the sentence was far too lenient for a crime planned over 9 months, the resolution of the case stands as a testament to the relentless efforts of the community and law enforcement to honor the memory of Pamela Britt, ensure that justice prevailed, and remove a highly dangerous individual from society Mott Ba. This tragic story serves as a profound warning about the dangers of unchecked obsession, reminding us all of the vital importance of vigilance, digital safety, and the collective duty to protect the innocent from the dark shadows of human malice. Through this deep and comprehensive analysis of the tragedy in Baldwin, Mississippi, we see the absolute necessity of recognizing the warning signs of stalking and obsessive behavior before they escalate into violence. By studying the mistakes and psychological flaws of the perpetrator, society can better equip itself to prevent such losses in the future. The memory of Pamela Britt, a devoted grandmother and beloved community member, is honored not by dwelling on the tragedy of her death, but by celebrating her warm spirit, her beautiful smile, and the enduring love she shared with her family, while continuing to strive for a safer, more vigilant world where justice and goodness ultimately triumph over evil Mott Ba. This complete, detailed examination offers valuable lessons for law enforcement and citizens alike, reinforcing the timeless truth that when communities stand together and support one another, the light of truth will always expose and dismantle the designs of those who harbor darkness in their hearts. May this narrative serve as a lasting tribute to a life well lived and a powerful call to action for the preservation of safety, peace, and justice in every corner of our society. Let us move forward with a renewed commitment to watching over our neighbors, protecting our loved ones, and ensuring that such devastating crimes find no safe harbor in our communities, thereby securing a brighter and safer future for generations to come. In examining the legal proceedings and the long journey toward a resolution, it is also essential to reflect on the immense emotional toll exerted on the families left behind, whose lives are permanently altered by a single individual's selfish acts. The resilience demonstrated by Pamela's children and grandchildren in the face of jhene, profound grief, is a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit, their determination to keep her memory alive as a loving, joyful woman, rather than a victim of a senseless crime, is a beautiful testament to the power of love over hatred. Law enforcement agencies, by continually refining their investigative techniques, embracing digital forensics, and fostering deep trust within the communities they serve, can ensure that justice is swift and certain. The rapid identification and arrest of the suspect in this case, driven by the immediate reporting of alert citizens and the swift actions of responding officers, prevented a dangerous criminal from escaping across state lines and continuing her wake of destruction. Mott. Ultimately, the victory of justice in this case, while bittersweet for those who mourn, provides a solemn assurance that society will not tolerate such acts of malice, and that those who seek to destroy the lives of others will inevitably face the full consequences of their actions under the law. Let this be a source of comfort to the grieving, a warning to the malevolent, and an enduring lesson in the absolute value of human life, community vigilance, and the relentless pursuit of truth. All elements of this narrative, from the quiet streets of Mississippi to the sterile environment of the courtroom, weave together a profound story of human fragility, the dark depths of obsession, and the ultimate triumph of justice, serving as a powerful educational tool and a beacon of hope for a safer tomorrow. By sharing these experiences and deeply analyzing the psychological undercurrents of such crimes, we can foster a more empathetic, watchful, and protected society, ensuring that the legacy of those we lose is one of lasting impact, awareness, and positive change. This analytical and narrative exploration concludes with a profound respect for the investigative forces, an unwavering empathy for the victims of crime, and a steadfast belief in the power of truth to heal and protect our world. Let us carry these lessons in our hearts, remaining ever vigilant, ever compassionate, and ever dedicated to the pursuit of peace and justice for all. The complex dynamics of human relationships sometimes present tragic realities that defy logical comprehension. In quiet corners of the country, where communities are close and neighborly trust is the foundation of daily life, crimes born of obsession can shatter the peace of many families. The tragedy of Pamela Britt, a beloved grandmother and grocery store employee in the quiet town of Baldwin, Mississippi, serves as a profound subject for analysis. To truly understand why such devastating events occur, one must look beyond the immediate shock of the crime and study the psychological motives that drive them, the structural loopholes exploited by those who commit them, and the critical lessons that can protect communities in the future. The primary motive in crimes of this nature is often a severe and toxic level of obsession, fueled by an inability to accept rejection. In the case of Pamela Britt, the perpetrator, Shawnie Vel Young, became entirely consumed by a past relationship with a man named David Scribner. What is particularly striking about this case is the vast discrepancy between the reality of the relationship and the perpetrator's internal perception of it. While the actual romantic association between the perpetrator and David Scribner lasted only a brief span of 10 to 12 days, the perpetrator spent approximately 9 months plotting the demise of the woman she perceived as her romantic rival. This demonstrates how a fragile ego, combined with untreated psychological obsession, can warp a person's reality to a point where they believe their own happiness is entirely dependent on possessing another person. When they cannot achieve this, their target shifts from reconciliation to the destruction of anyone standing in their way. These tragic cases occur with alarming frequency in modern society due to several sociological and psychological factors. First, the proliferation of digital tracking methods and social media has made it incredibly easy for individuals with malicious intent to surveil their targets. In decades past, stalking required physical presence and significant effort, which often increased the likelihood of detection before any physical harm could occur. Today, social media platforms allow individuals to easily determine where a person lives, what they drive, and what their daily routines are. In this case, the perpetrator utilized a tracking device disguised as a mobile phone, wrapped in plastic and taped to the victim's vehicle, allowing her to monitor the victim's movements constantly. This kind of technological enablement lowers the barrier of entry for obsessed individuals to transition from passive resentment to active predatory stalking. Furthermore, a lack of early intervention for individuals showing severe signs of obsessive behavior allows these situations to escalate. Often, family members and friends notice the warning signs, such as a person constantly talking about an ex-partner or showing an unhealthy preoccupation with a stranger. But they fail to report it to authorities because they do not believe the threat will turn physical. When investigating these complex crimes, law enforcement agencies rely on a combination of digital forensics, physical evidence, and community awareness to track down perpetrators. In the case of Pamela Britt, the immediate actions of her employers, Trent and Stephanie Rogers, were the most critical catalysts in solving the crime quickly. When the victim did not return to her shift at the grocery store, her employers did not simply dismiss her absence. Instead, they acted out of genuine concern and drove to her home to investigate. This highlights the immense value of community vigilance. Upon arriving at the house, Trent Rogers encountered a suspicious woman dressed entirely in black, who was pale, sweaty, and claimed that the victim did not live there. This immediate confrontation, followed by the suspect fleeing into a nearby field, provided the responding officer, Nicola Ward, with a direct lead. The quick thinking of the officer in apprehending the suspect before she could escape the area was paramount. Once the suspect was in custody, the physical evidence she carried in her bag painted an undeniable picture of premeditated harm. Officers discovered a roll of plastic wrap, a taser, a dark navy pillowcase, zip ties, a stolen driver's license belonging to the suspect's cousin, Lee Ann Mann, and bus tickets purchased under that stolen identity to travel to Indiana. The alignment of these tools with the physical findings on the victim's body, which showed signs of deprivation of oxygen, and marks consistent with a taser and wrist restraints, provided the physical proof needed to build a capital murder case. Furthermore, digital forensics played an essential role. By analyzing the suspect's electronic devices, investigators uncovered search histories detailing methods of causing harm, queries about how long it takes for a person to perish, and even bizarre plans on how to dispose of a physical form. This digital paper trail, combined with the physical tracking device recovered from the victim's vehicle, destroyed any defense of accidental harm or self-defense that the suspect attempted to present. The sophistication of such criminals is often a paradox of elaborate planning and astonishing foolishness. The perpetrator in this case believed she had designed a flawless crime. She dressed entirely in black, a style of clothing commonly worn by David Scribner's former partner, Yvonne, who worked at a local restaurant. By doing this, the perpetrator hoped that any security cameras in the neighborhood would capture a figure in black and lead investigators to arrest Yvonne instead, making her the perfect scapegoat. This shows a high degree of calculation and a chilling willingness to ruin multiple lives to achieve her goals. She also stole her cousin's identity, purchased bus tickets under that false name, and left a vehicle far from the scene to avoid suspicion. However, despite these intricate details, the perpetrator's plan crumbled due to basic human errors and the unpredictability of a caring community. She did not anticipate that the victim's employers would care enough to check on her after only an hour of absence. She did not realize that walking away from a crime scene in a small town while looking visibly exhausted and sweating would immediately draw suspicion. This gap between the criminal's belief in their own intelligence and the clumsy reality of their execution is a common theme in such investigations, highlighting that no matter how much time is spent planning, the truth has a way of coming to light. Profound life lessons can be drawn from this tragedy to prevent similar occurrences. First and foremost, we must foster a culture of active neighborly care and community involvement. The intervention of Trent and Stephanie Rogers did not save the victim's life, but it absolutely prevented the perpetrator from escaping justice, and it saved another innocent woman, Yvonne, from being wrongfully accused and potentially imprisoned for a crime she did not commit. This demonstrates that looking out for one another and acting promptly when something feels wrong is a powerful shield against harm. Additionally, individuals must take early warning signs of stalking seriously. When the victim previously discovered a pile of rocks placed in a strange pattern on her floorboard and caught a figure on a security camera reaching under her car, the situation was not reported to the police because it was assumed to be a minor nuisance related to a domestic disagreement. Had law enforcement been involved at that early stage, they might have discovered the tracking device sooner, potentially disrupting the perpetrator's plans before they could reach a tragic climax. Society must also educate people on the red flags of toxic relationships and obsession. When friends or family members exhibit obsessive behaviors, such as fabricating extreme falsehoods like a terminal illness to get an ex-partner's attention, or trying to use dark rituals to break up a couple, it is a clear sign that professional mental health intervention or legal boundaries are required. To assist law enforcement in catching perpetrators faster, several systemic improvements can be implemented. One highly effective method is the rapid integration of public and private digital surveillance networks. In modern investigations, having immediate access to residential security cameras and business dashcams can reconstruct a suspect's movements within minutes rather than days. This is particularly crucial in rural areas where physical witnesses may be scarce. Furthermore, enhancing interagency cooperation and real-time data sharing can prevent criminals from using stolen identities to cross state lines. When a person reports their vehicle or identification stolen, that information should immediately trigger alerts across nearby jurisdictions and transportation hubs. Had the suspect reached the bus station, a rapid identity verification system would have flagged the mismatch between her physical appearance and the stolen driver's license of her cousin. Finally, training patrol officers to trust their instincts and act decisively, as Officer Nicola Ward did when she pursued the fleeing suspect in the field, remains one of the most reliable tools in police work. To understand the full scope of this event, we must look closely at the details of that fateful day, February 11th, 2020. It was a typical, busy Tuesday morning in the small, tight-knit community of Baldwin, Mississippi. Trent and Stephanie Rogers, the dedicated owners of a local grocery store, were managing their daily operations when they noticed that one of their trusted employees, 63-year-old Pamela Britt, was not feeling well. Pamela, known to everyone as a warm, outgoing person who loved her family, was experiencing symptoms that she believed were related to her blood pressure. Her employers, caring deeply for her well-being, advised her to take a break, go home, and rest. Pamela agreed, hoping a short nap would help her recover, and she departed for her home, which was located only a few minutes away. As the minutes turned into an hour, and then passed beyond that, a sense of unease began to grow at the grocery store. Pamela Britt was not the type of person to neglect her duties or fail to communicate. She was reliable, highly professional, and beloved by the customers she greeted daily. By approximately noon or 5 minutes past 12, Stephanie Rogers expressed her concern to her husband, Trent, noting that Pamela had not returned. After attempting to call her phone and receiving no response, the couple realized that something was seriously wrong. Trent Rogers decided to make the short drive to Pamela's residence on East Clayton Street to check on her safety. Upon arriving at the house, Trent knocked on the front door but received no answer. Trusting his intuition, he walked toward the back of the property to see if a door might be unlocked or if there were signs of activity. To his immense surprise, the back door was opened by a woman he had never seen before in their small town. This mysterious woman was dressed entirely in black, wearing black pants, a black shirt, a black hooded coat, and a black headband. She appeared pale and was sweating profusely, looking as though she had just engaged in strenuous physical labor. When Trent asked her where Pamela was, the stranger replied coldly that Pamela did not live there. For a brief moment, Trent wondered if he had gone to the wrong house, but a quick call to his wife confirmed that he was indeed at the correct location. Realizing that the situation was highly suspicious, Trent watched as the woman in black walked away from the house and headed up the road. He immediately contacted emergency services, dialing 911, and began to follow her from a safe distance. Soon after, responding officer Nicola Ward arrived at the scene. As the officer approached, the woman in black suddenly veered off the road and began walking quickly through a nearby field. Officer Ward pursued her, calling out for her to stop and identifying herself as a member of the police department. Instead of complying, the suspect increased her speed, forcing the officer to run to catch up with her. When the officer finally reached the suspect and detained her, the woman immediately blurted out that she had not done anything, a defensive reaction that immediately signaled to the officer that a crime had indeed occurred. While one officer remained with the detained suspect, others returned to the house with Trent and Stephanie Rogers. The property was locked, but upon gaining entry to the garage, they made a devastating discovery. Pamela Britt was found lying on the floor. She still had her keys in her hand, and her purse was sitting on the first step of the entryway. To a casual observer, it might have looked like she had suffered a sudden, natural medical episode and collapsed, as there were no obvious external wounds or signs of severe trauma. However, her lips and face were very blue, indicating a severe lack of oxygen. As detectives processed the scene and examined the detained woman, the true horror of what had occurred began to unfold. A search of the suspect's large, multicolored handbag revealed items that were directly linked to the victim's physical state. Inside the bag, officers found a roll of heavy plastic wrap, a taser, a dark navy pillowcase, zip ties, and a stolen driver's license belonging to Leigh Ann Mann, along with bus tickets purchased in her name. An examination of the victim's body revealed marks on her wrists consistent they kept, tahat being bound by zip ties, and electrical marks on her chest that matched the taser found in the bag. It became clear that the suspect had laid in wait for Pamela to return home, assaulted her as she attempted to enter her house, and used the items in her bag to deprive her of oxygen until she passed away. The investigation soon shifted to identifying the mysterious woman in black, who refused to speak or provide her name to authorities. A break in the case came when detectives examined the victim's mobile phone and found a recent call log to Jhene Scribner, the mother of the victim's boyfriend, David Scribner. When contacted, Jhene suggested that the person responsible might be David's ex-partner, Yvonne, who had allegedly been seen loitering around the property on previous occasions. However, when Detective Young brought Yvonne in for questioning, he quickly realized she was not the woman in custody. Yvonne had a rock-solid alibi, as she was working at Motaft, her restaurant job at the time of the crime. Furthermore, Yvonne's description of her clothing, which consisted of all black garments worn by the waitresses at her workplace, provided the crucial realization that the perpetrator had deliberately dressed in black to frame Yvonne and make her the prime suspect. With Yvonne cleared, the focus turned to another past partner of David Scribner, a woman named Shawnie Vel Young. David contacted the police and explained that Shawnie had developed an extreme, unhealthy obsession with him after their very brief relationship had ended. He revealed that Shawnie had been staying with her cousin, Leigh Ann Mann, and had left early that morning under the pretense of going to work, but had never arrived. When Leigh Ann and her friend Beth Reed came to the police station, they provided a detailed and chilling portrait of the suspect's mental state. They described how Shawnie was entirely consumed by David, constantly talking about him, and refusing to accept that he had moved on to a relationship with Pamela. Shawnie had even tried to use desperate measures, such as asking for love spells to separate the couple and fabricating stories about having a terminal illness to gain David's sympathy. The cousin also revealed that Shawnie had been actively stalking Pamela for months, using her phone to monitor Pamela's social media and track her daily routines. The suspect had even constructed a homemade tracking device using a mobile phone wrapped in plastic and tape, which she had secretly attached to the undercarriage of Pamela's car. This explained the mysterious incident a month prior, when Pamela had discovered strange objects on her floorboard and captured a figure in black on her security camera. The level of planning was extensive, but the execution was ultimately undone by the swift actions of the community and the thoroughness of the police. When investigators searched the electronic devices belonging to Shawnie Vel Young, they uncovered overwhelming evidence of her intent. Her search history was filled with detailed queries on how to commit a crime without leaving evidence, the physical effects of deprivation of oxygen, and ways to dispose of a physical form. The presence of her cousin, stolen identification, and the bus tickets to Indiana indicated that she had planned to flee the state immediately after the crime, leaving Yvonne to face the consequences of her actions. The fingerprint analysis officially confirmed that the woman in black was indeed Shawnie Vel Young, and she was subsequently charged with capital murder, kidnapping, and stalking. Despite the mountain of evidence against her, including being caught, leaving the scene with the tools used to commit the crime, the suspect remained silent for a month before attempting to claim that she had acted in self-defense during a physical confrontation initiated by the victim. However, forensic analysis of the communication records showed absolutely no contact between the two women, completely refuting her claims. After a series of legal delays, during which her defense team attempted to argue that she was mentally unfit to stand trial, the court ruled her competent in 2023. To avoid the possibility of a death sentence under a capital murder conviction, she agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 27 years in prison. The family of Pamela Britt expressed deep dissatisfaction with the sentence, feeling that 27 years was an insufficient punishment for a crime that was planned so meticulously over 9 months. They remembered Pamela not for the tragic circumstances of her passing, but for her vibrant smile, her deep love for her children and 7 grandchildren, and her kind, generous spirit that touched everyone in her community. This case remains a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked obsession, the vital importance of community care, and the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement. Good ultimately prevailed over a calculated attempt to cause harm, ensuring that the perpetrator was held accountable and could no longer pose a threat to society.